When fall rolls around and the temperatures drop, Vermonters reach for their coziest wool blankets. This summer, though, some residents found a very different use for the warm textile.
I mean, anytime a sheep gets falls into water or whatever, and you're trying to pull her out, you realize that she's like 200 pounds more than what she should be. But so I knew that the wool held water that way.
Albert Wilde is visiting from Utah, where he and his family run a ranch with sheep and beef cows. He's in Vermont to share information with researchers and farmers about the innovative way he's come up with to use wool.
My wife had asked if there was a way that I could come up with trying to hold water or make it so she would water her plants less. And so I went and got some of the waste wool that we had around our farm, and I put it in around her plants. And at first she was like, "What have you done?" But then it worked so well that she's like, "Hey, that really worked." And we were able to go on vacation and come home 7 days later, and her plants still looked great, which in Utah, that was a big deal.
Wilde eventually devised a way to turn the raw wool into pellets that can be added to soil as an amendment. He worked with researchers at Utah State University throughout the process, doing trials about how much water the pellets held and how much fertilizer value they have. Those studies had some surprising results.
It was feeding the plants on day one, so it was starting to feed the plants way before most organic fertilizers do, which is typically they have a lag time of 45 days, and so day one here this was available. In fact, the trials that we did with the tomato plants reduced the plants from 76 days to be market ready to go into a store to 38 days. So half the time. That was a huge surprise for all of us involved.
We have wool is considered a waste product now because it costs so much for farmers to actually...
Kimberly Hagen works at the University of Vermont Center for Sustainable Agriculture. She also raises sheep herself, so she knows the issues involved in dealing with fleece, the plentiful and often valueless byproduct.
For the most part, it really goes out in the woods, out on the back 40. If you have a couple of really nice ones, there is the wool pool, and they do a fleece sale every year. The Vermont Sheep and Goat Association does a fleece sale. So if you do have a couple of really nice ones, you could put it up for sale if you wanted to. But it is a bit of effort. But most people, I would say, if it's worth their time, they will drive it to the wool pool. But it doesn't quite pay even for the full cost.
Hagen and colleagues from UVM and the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets were working on a feasibility study of value-added products made with wool when they heard about the pellets. One major advantage is that the pellets are a low-phosphorus fertilizer, so there is no nutrient runoff into waterways, a crucial concern for Vermont's overloaded system.
It jumped out at me immediately when I saw the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, that it was strong nitrogen and zero phosphorus with a little potassium.
The researchers enlisted several farmers around the state to give the pellets a try.
Because we were so limited with funds, we chose 4 farmers with 4 different soil types in 4 different parts of the state, and they're all using it on their broccoli crop. And they're growing a 100-foot row of broccoli alongside a 100-foot row with their usual soil amendment fertilizer.
Prior to planting, I went in with the wool pellets as well as some peanut meal, which we use as a base fertilizer, and no fertilizer. So we had the 3 different plots in the same bed of broccoli, and that's the basis of the experiment.
It hasn't been a whole season yet, so farmer Will Stevens is still waiting to see what the results will be.
Early on, we think we saw a little bit of a jump in the 100 feet of wool pellet trial, but then it seemed as though things evened out. And right now we are probably 6 weeks or so into plant growth, so we're not quite to harvest. We're getting close, but right now it's hard to say that I can see a difference. It's pretty flat across the bed from both the controls, the peanut meal, and the wool pellets. So I'm eager to see kind of what happens with harvest, whether or not things ripen at the same time. I'm interested to see what the root growth looks like. Maybe we can pull some plants in the bed along the way and see if there's something going on under the soil that we can't see on top.
The hardest part of trying to use wool is being able to apply it.
For sheep farmers, having a market for their otherwise unusable wool could have a major impact.
We have quite a bit of wool that's sitting in bags and we're unsure what to do with it.
Sammy of Delphita and Anna Bowlen have a small, diversified farm in Randolph where they raise sheep and cows. They're here looking for different ways to use their stores of wool.
We've been trying to sell it, but it hasn't really been working for us. So right now it's just in storage, just trying, like Anna just said, trying to find a use for it. And
We could send it to a mill, but that's pretty costly. We could try to process it ourselves, but it's a pretty, detailed process and involves a lot of time. So, yeah. So another way to use it effectively would be really great.
The difference for the sheep farmer between having to throw wool away and getting, maybe $1 or $2 per pound on that wool, which otherwise is a waste product, wool that's not good enough to turn into a textile of any kind, can actually make the difference for them in cash flowing, like in making a profitable enterprise. It's the small things sometimes that you need to do multiple small things in an operation.
It's a simple idea that could make sense for Vermont. These researchers will have some answers soon from their small sample of trials. If the results are positive, they'll move on to larger studies. And if that data shows promise, these farmers are ready. In Shelburne, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.